So my name is Gene Farrell. I am a general manager in AWS. I'm responsible for a number of different services, including the directory service. And this afternoon, we want to give you a briefing on directory service, which launched a couple weeks ago. How many folks in the room have actually had a chance to use directory service? Just to kind of gauge my audience here. A couple folks. OK, good. Great. Well, let me kind of take you through what we're going to do today. First, I want to talk about why we built this service, what it's designed to do, and what it doesn't do yet. So we'll talk about what is directory service, the features and functionality, some of the common use cases that we've heard from customers that we're trying to solve. And then we're going to give you a quick demo of the directory service, really take you through the kind of the console and how you can engage and interact with it, and then talk through pricing, availability, and then we'll actually have a Q&A session. I think it's across the hall, is that right?
Yes. So we'll just step outside so that the next session can get started.
A lot of traffic coming through these sessions, so we'll do all the Q&A across the hall then. Great. Oh, before I do that, I should introduce Prayer Garth. Prayer leads the directory service team and has really built out what we're going to be talking about today and will be responsible for driving the roadmap going forward. So why do we build the service? Essentially, what customers told us was that managing separate user accounts between on-prem and the AWS cloud could be confusing and difficult to manage. As we've seen more and more enterprises bring workloads to the cloud, they're struggling with how do you, when you don't start cloud first and you want to integrate your on-prem directory, they really struggle with that. And then they also want to give their end users more flexibility as far as accessing applications running on AWS. So it's things like workspaces or Zocalo using their on-prem credentials. They don't want them to have a separate set of credentials. The other thing that we heard a lot from developers and enterprise customers was having the ability to manage their Windows-based resources on AWS the same way that they manage them today when they're working in an on-prem data center or their own data center, where they can use Active Directory tools, group policies, those types of things to be able to manage those instances. So we're really trying to build a solution that addressed that access and identity management, as well as how do I manage Microsoft workloads and Windows-based resources. So what is the directory service? I usually like to start this discussion with what it's not. Today, the directory service is really designed to support two very specific use cases. It is not designed to replace your existing on-prem Active Directory. It's designed to work with your Active Directory that you have on-prem, but it's not designed to be a lift and shift of your on-premise identities to the cloud. Essentially, it's managed directories, and there's two different forms of service. It's what we call an AD connector and simple AD. AD connector essentially is a proxy that allows you to connect your AWS resources to your on-premise Active Directory. And essentially, any resources you create in our cloud, you'd be able to then join to your on-prem Active Directory, use all the tools and processes you use today, whether it's AD tools or other systems management tools. They can all integrate through your on-premise Active Directory to the AWS resources. And then Simple AD is designed to be a lightweight cloud-based directory. It's actually based on Samba. And it offers Microsoft Active Directory compatibility and many of the common features that you're used to using with Active Directory. We think the big benefits here is for end users, it lets them access AWS resources using their on-prem credentials. And by that, I mean both the AWS Management Console through IAM roles and federation, as well as AWS applications like Amazon Workspaces and Zocalo. And then soon we're going to enable the ability to actually domain join computers, virtual machines at launch. So you'll be able to, from the Launch Console, be able to provision an EC2 Windows instance and actually have it joined to your Active Directory on-prem at launch time. And that's a feature that we've heard a lot from customers about. So let me dive into some of the kind of the key features. First of all, we really focused on, like a lot of AWS services, we really focused on trying to make this really easy and fast to provision. So today, it is a very simple wizard. We'll show you in the demo. It's literally takes about 5 minutes for you to either set up a simple AD or a connection to your on-prem AD. It's a fully managed service, so the underlying instances that the directories run on or the communication proxy runs on are fully managed by us. We build it in a highly available way. We manage all the patching and configuration management so you don't have to worry about it. And then we monitor the APIs to ensure that they're always performant and highly available. We also then provide auditing and logging, so you have all the standard logs that you'd expect to get from an AWS service. And then you can also use Windows event logs. We also have simple AD, and that's primarily for simple AD, I should say, because the connector, you'd use the tools that you have on-prem to manage that performance. So let me dive in a little bit more to specifically the connector. As I talked about, this is really a gateway or a proxy. And to deploy this, it requires that you have either a VPN or a direct connect between your on-prem resources and your AWS resources. And then it also integrates with your, or it can integrate with your existing Radius solutions for multi-factor authentication. So you can use Radius to authenticate both into the AWS console or into the applications. As I talked about, it lets users use their on-prem credentials for logging into both Zocalo and workspaces. You saw from the main stage today J&J talking about a workspaces deployment. They're actually using AD connector to connect all of their workspaces environment to their on-prem resources and their on-prem Active Directory. And in this scenario, the actual authentication is happening against their on-prem AD. We're just proxying the call in. For the IT staff, or anybody that you want to give access to the AWS Management Console, they can use their on-prem AD credentials to then log into the console. And you can actually set up and control roles around what they can and can't do when they come onto AWS. So one of the challenges that customers tell us is that many times they have multiple accounts across AWS that they're trying to manage. And they might have administrators that they want to have either manage a service or administer or manage resources that they have deployed on Amazon, but they don't necessarily want to have that person have a master IAM account or have access to the overall corporate credentials. So this solution would allow them to use an assigned role from their on-prem Active Directory and then assigned roles within AWS to let them manage resources. And we'll talk about that in the demo. Prayer will show you how you can deploy that type of a solution.
So that means that we'll be able to manage roles in the console itself?
Mm-hmm. You'll be able to manage AWS roles
Right.
For a user that exists in your on-prem Active Directory.
All right. And does that mean does the corresponding accounts still have to exist in IAM?
You will, so you'll be, from your AWS account, you'll create a user against your on-prem Active Directory. And within that account, within that IAM account, you'll be able to give them permissions to manage resources.
I will demo that in Hank.
It's a little confusing until you can see it, but yeah. And then soon we'll offer the ability to auto-domain join computers when you launch them. So Simple AD is really a fully hosted, managed directory in the cloud. And there's a couple different workloads we'll talk about to do that. We use Samba 4, which is an open source AD compatible directory as the foundation. And it allows you to use common AD features and functionalities. So users and groups, domain joining computers, Kerberos-based authentication, and it supports group policy. This user group can be used to access AWS apps using a cloud-only directory. So this would be a scenario where you would actually set up your users in a directory in the Amazon cloud and be able to then join those app services to that directory. So this could be a scenario where you want to have a standalone group of users or a separate dev test environment. The IT staff, again, can use a directory, or sorry, an identity that was set up in the Simple AD to, again, access on-prem, or sorry, AWS resources using that same federation that we just talked about. And you'll also be able to auto-domain join computers to that cloud-based directory. So very, very similar as far as functionality. The biggest difference is the directory actually resides in the cloud, and we manage the entire directory for you relative to the underlying resources, replication, recovery, and backup. So security, obviously, when you're dealing with identities, is super important. So both of these services only work with VPC, Virtual Private Cloud. The connector uses industry standard authentication and supports Radius MFA. And this is really designed to integrate with existing Radius solutions. So we're not introducing a new type of multi-factor authentication. It's really connecting to your existing systems. And then you can domain join Windows instances against that, and then ensure you have consistent policy enforcement. I talked a little bit about highly available and reliability. So essentially, when we create either of these solutions, we do it in multiple availability zones, and we replicate across. So if you have an instance of the directory that goes bad in one AZ, we fail over to the second one, and then we will automatically repair and recover the first. We have automatic host replacement, and we do give you the ability then to replicate or take snapshots of your AD, and we can recover those if for some reason something changes in your Active Directory. So a couple of key use cases. I've mentioned a few of these. But we think this will greatly simplify the administration and management of Windows instances in AWS, something our customers have been asking for a lot. Today, many customers that want this functionality go and actually set up their own domain controllers. They try and manage them themselves. It can be somewhat cumbersome and complicated to do and takes a lot of time. This simplifies that process for them. It also gives you the ability to then it makes it easier to manage your AWS resources where you have a few IAM accounts or even multiple accounts across an enterprise, being able to establish and give permissions to existing enterprise users that you don't necessarily want to set up an IAM. It certainly makes access to our apps much simpler for users that want to use either cloud-based identities or on-prem identities. And then it makes it super affordable for customers that want to set up Windows-based domains in AWS. It makes managing that, bring that up, and we've heard from a lot of customers that want to do kind of dev test, or another use case we hear a lot about is VendorNet, where you might have a group of outside contractors that you want to set up in a directory, but not necessarily have that on-prem or connected to your existing Active Directory. Cool. Ferry, you want to fire up a demo, and we'll. Directories are so exciting to see live.
Exactly. So I have a few things I'll show you, just so it's much more fun to actually see stuff in action. So let's see if we can get the screen up there.
You can see it down there as well, yeah.
Yeah, of course. Of course, it's never the same what I can see, right? So I'll show you a few things that sort of Gene mentioned. One, I'll show you how easy it is to set up a directory. Now, how many people have actually gone and set up Microsoft Active Directory on a server? Okay, so just as a sort of a comparison, you'll get a sense of what it takes to set up now a directory in the cloud. I'll show you how some of the Windows compatibility pieces that exist. So we'll sort of get a feel from a Windows box what it feels like. I'll show you some of the integration we have done with the AWS applications and IAM to enable access to the management console. So you get a good picture of what are some of the capabilities we are enabling. So let's start by actually going through the setup wizard. So right off the bat, it's basically a three-step wizard. First step is picking up the type of directory you want to set up. So either it's a connector to your on-premises directory, or it's a directory hosted in the cloud, which is simple AD. So if you're setting up, if you say, let's say you want to set up a simple AD, then basically you get to provide 4 or 5 pieces of information, the DNS name that you want for that directory, and because this is isolated to your VPC, you can set up any name. It's not any DNS name. It's because it's not like a public DNS. It's isolated to your virtual private cloud. The NetBIOS name for sort of a legacy compatibility reasons, and then a password for your domain administrator account. Let me see if I don't fat finger that. And then the specific VPC you want this directory to be set up in, right? And as Gene mentioned, it's a highly available installation that'll happen. We'll be installing 2 directory servers in 2 availability zones, so on 2 separate subnets. And they will be, if you're familiar with how RDS works, they will be visible on those subnets, so your Windows computers can join to them. So it'll be isolated to that particular VPC. And that's basically it, right? The next step is it just confirms, and I'll create the directory. I'll actually skip the creation process. It takes about 3 minutes to get a directory up and running, right? So if you've set up Microsoft Active Directory and what it takes, I think you can do a good comparison. You'll get a redundant directory hosted in AWS Cloud. In the case of the AD connector, of course, this is a stateless proxy to your on-premises Active Directory, right? So in that sense, it's slightly different than a directory hosted in the cloud. In this particular case, what you're providing is information about your on-premises Active Directory. So you're providing the DNS address of your on-premises directory. And one of the important things that this proxy uses is a connector account. This is a non-administrative, fairly low privilege account, a service account, that the proxy uses to authenticate to the domain controllers that are running on premises. And again, the setup of this is redundant. So we have 2 instances running, so just in case if one of them goes down, you still have access available through the other proxy. And then also, we monitor the domain controllers that are running on premises. So if your domain controllers become unreachable, we will fail over to a different domain controller. So the proxy tries very hard to make the directory available to the AWS cloud. And then again, the proxy is also isolated to a specific VPC. So it's not accessible from outside of the VPC, so whatever routing configuration you've set up. So that's in terms of setting up the directories. Let me now switch over. Actually, let me show you one more thing. What I did was I already set up a directory. So I'll cancel out of here. And I already went ahead and set one up just so that we can quickly see what it looks like once it's actually set up in the console. So what you see here is a simple AD directory I've set up. So and the directory name is aws-domain.company.com. It can be anything that you want. And this directory is actually enabled for various AWS applications, the workspaces, Zocalo, as well as the management console. I'm going to use this directory, and I already took the liberty of joining a Windows, EC2 Windows instance to this directory. So what you see there is an admin box is already joined to the directory. So I'm going to go ahead and use remote desktop to actually connect to it. So if you used EC2 Windows before, so normal procedure is now you have to use a local administrator password. You RDP into the box. And just to get the administrator password, you have to have a public-private key pair, and you have to decrypt that, and then you have to set up. Once the EC2 instance is domain joined, we can actually just use our domain credentials to log in, right? So all of the EC2 instances, so of course, the pop-up came on a different screen. So I'll use the AWS domain so I don't fat finger this thing. So I'll use my domain credentials from the AWS domain, the domain that we just set up. And let me move this over to the other screen. So we've got a remote desktop session to that instance. Okay. For some reason, it's much larger than the screen. So as you can see, it's the admin box instance. One of the things I did was on this particular instance, I got some of the Active Directory tools up and running. So you get a feel for, so we have the Active Directory users and computers running. So these are your favorite tools to manage Active Directory. And you can see that it's connected to awsdomain.company.com. So it's actually talking to the AWS directory we just set up. If you look into the domain controllers, you'll actually see the 2 domain controllers that we are managing for this directory. So these are the Samba 4 Active Directory compatible servers that we are running. Under computers, you can see the admin box, that's domain join. And then under users, you'll see a bunch of user accounts, including the account that I created for myself, another one for Gene. And we'll be using a couple of these accounts to sort of do a quick demo of other things. So as you can notice, sort of, it gives you a fairly good feature set in terms of Windows compatibility and Active Directory compatibility. And so you can use the same set of tools to manage your environment and create accounts and group membership and things like that. Let me switch back. And so let me also now show you some of the integration we've done with the directory for AWS applications and services. So for example, if you have some of your end users that you want to give out them workspaces so that they have remote desktops that they can access from anywhere with essentially their corporate credentials. So now it's as simple as clicking through your AWS Directory Service console and going into workspaces and picking the directory that that user belongs to, and then finding, like, you'll notice that you can search for your users in that directory. So this Windows directory that's running, it could be running on premises or it could be running in AWS Cloud, and we can look up users in that directory. We can assign them workspaces, and they'll be able to log into those workspaces, right? So you can assign them different kind of workspace workloads and so on. Similarly, if your IT needs to be able to access the AWS management console so that they can manage EC2 instances, S3 buckets, using their corporate credentials, they can do the same thing. And we'll be able to kind of set up various AWS IAM roles. This was a question, Hank, you were asking. So you can add a new role. You can add, so if you have existing roles that you have set up with very custom permissions as to which S3 buckets they can manage, which EC2 instances you can manage, you can pick roles, existing roles that you might have. You also have the option of creating new roles, right? So we've provided a set of templates that grant a set of permissions, and you can grant a new role to users within that. I already created a few roles and granted some of the users, so you can see my account has all access. I took the liberty of giving Gene only read access. We don't want Gene managing AWS resources. So you can sort of see Gene only has access to read-only access to S3 bucket. And adding membership to these roles, in terms of checking the policy first. So when you click on the policy link, it takes you right into the IAM console, and you can see what permissions and what policies set up. So it tightly integrates into the IAM roles.
Well, yeah, because one of the things we're setting up is the whole hierarchy as a dual flow graph deployment. One role that I didn't hear you talk about, you used to be enterprise admin with most powerful admin, now it's billing admin, right?
Mm-hmm.
So which comes out? Can I make a regular user billing admin using the profiles?
Yes. So if you can set up a role, right?
Using the out-of-the-box roles. So all
Yeah.
the roles out of the box are.
All the out-of-the-box roles are accessible, and you can create new ones.
And how many objects could be in a large directory?
In the large AWS a simple AD, you can we today scale it up to 10,000 objects, the large directory. Now that's sort of our guidance. It's a soft guidance itself.
Depends on how big the objects are.
Well, the next question is then, would I be able to shard my directories at 10,000 is your upper limit, and I have 100,000 users?
We should talk offline about sort of if you want to throw 100,000 objects, what's the good architecture for that? Yeah, the current version that we have by itself may not meet that need, right? A single directory may not meet that, but you can set up multiple directories.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, the other thing I would say is that, like most AWS products, we start with kind of what we call an MVP or a minimum viable, and then we look to get feedback from customers. So, early customer feedback in the desktop space was, 10,000 seemed like a reasonable number to start with, and then we can scale that depending on what the needs are. There you go.
And in terms of sort of managing membership into those roles, again, if you've used any of the federation type solutions, it's a fairly kind of cumbersome process to take the role ARN and copy it into your policies and so on. With this integration that we have done here, it's as simple as sort of typing the username and being able to find those users. Right? So what you see is a fairly deep integration in terms of being able to look up users and be able to grant permissions to them. All of that experience has been enabled fairly sort of in a simple way and natively. So now let me show you what happens when this user that we've granted some access to now logs in from the AWS Management Console. So what you see is the first thing is the URL is awsdomain.awsapps.com. So every customer gets their own unique URL from which they will be logging in, right? And this URL gives them access to the Zocalo application, gives them access to Amazon Workspaces, right? And also the AWS Management Console, right? So what you see is /console is the, so what we'll log in as Gene, just to sort of show you the roles. So notice that it authenticates the user and then detects that the user is actually in multiple IAM roles. And so it gives you the option of selecting which particular role you want to log in as. And then it redirects the user to the AWS Management Console. So now, right up here, you can see that Gene's actually logged in as S3 read-only role. So in this role, the only thing Gene's account can do is be able to see the S3 buckets, right? So if you go into EC2 here, you will not have any access. As you can sort of see, you're not authorized. If you go into S3, Gene can see the S3 buckets we've set up. But if you try to create a bucket, of course, the authorization is not allowed. So I'm able to log in using my corporate credentials and access AWS Management Console as an IT person as well. So those are just sort of quickly summarizing back.
So with AD Direct, does it sync the accounts into AWS or not?
Sorry?
AD Direct, does it replicate accounts into?
No,
Good question.
So the AD connector does not replicate. It is literally just a communication proxy between the AWS resources and your on-prem AD.
So all authentication happens on on-prem?
All actions, authentications, lookups, right? Everything gets basically proxied to the on-premises. Right? There is no caching.
There's no caching.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Actually, that was a very specific piece of feedback we got from customers that they did not want us to see that. That's actually why we built the AD connector. And then for the customers that are comfortable with the data sitting in AWS Cloud, we provided a hosted directory in the cloud, right? So it's a very clear demarcation in terms of the service. So just quickly summarize what we sort of, so there's seamless integration with Windows. So the single sign-on using Kerberos works and group policies, the compatibility with Active Directory tools, and then integration with AWS applications and AWS Management Console, right? So you get sort of best of both worlds.
So quickly, let's talk about pricing and availability. So just a couple thoughts on pricing. First of all, it's pay-as-you-go, just like most other AWS services, so no long-term commitments. And we think it's very cost-effective. And you'll see in a second when I show you the pricing, it's super cheap. And we do offer a free trial. So here are your details. There's actually, for the two different types of directories, so you have AD Connector and Simple AD. They're priced actually the same, because essentially they're using the same underpinning resources. So for a small directory, it's 5 cents an hour. And for a large directory, it's 15 cents an hour. And we got some feedback early on when we first introduced this. Well, why, for a directory that may run for months or years, why did you price by the hour? And really, it's to try and address a developer use case where we had a lot of customers that said, I'd like to be able to have a group of instances. I can spin up a directory, join a bunch of instances to it, run a dev test environment for a couple weeks, and shut it down, but not have to pay for the directory for the entire month. So really trying to give you that flexibility. And even when you multiply that out to a monthly price, it's still very affordable. We then also offer a free trial. So there's a couple different ways to do that based on the size. So for a small directory, we give you 750 hours or 30 days for free. And then for any of the customers that subscribe to AWS apps, we provide you a directory at no cost. So if you've set up workspaces or Zocalo, you can now use that directory to join other AWS resources to it or to use some of this new functionality. Availability today, we're available in 5 regions. US East and US West and Oregon, the EU, Asia Pacific in Sydney, and Asia Pacific in Tokyo. And we'll be expanding to other regions. We anticipate hitting the rest of the regions probably in the next year, if not sooner. And we'll shortly be announcing availability of the auto domain join for EC2 instances at launch, as well as cross-account support for AWS resources and the management console.
Sorry, say the question. Sure. So what we launched the service 2 weeks ago, and the #1 feedback we got from customers was, I want to be able to set a one AD connector and then access multiple AWS accounts for my users, right? So guess what? We're going to enable that. So today, what you saw in the demo, when the roles list showed up, right, it was from the account that the AD connector was in. And we'll essentially enable you to identify roles from other accounts and then be able to assign users to those accounts. So which means when you log in from the login page, you will now see roles from all the different accounts that the user may have access to, and then be able to access those. What soon?
Not this week. SAML support is...
Yeah, so SAML support is something, another great feedback. We're actually, we've received that feedback from other customers as well, so it's part of our roadmap that we're thinking about, yeah. For the folks that just talked about the cross-account support, we can have a conversation outside as to if that is something that's blocking you. I'm happy to have a discussion what we can do.
Great.
Question about VPCs. Like you said, it's tied to one VPC. Will it be have multiples? Can you leverage VPC?
Peering. Yes.
Yep.
As long as you can route to the subnet that the domain controller is available in, you can authenticate and access. Same with the gateway as well. Yes.
Yeah.
What kind of visibility would we have into the simple connector? I'm thinking about using it for a dev test environment where people are testing serverless implementation to other things. So in the event that a developer is trying to make something work and can't get it to work, is there any way that we can look at the simple AD side and figure out when they're
Inside the underlying resource, I don't believe we have that.
Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
He's asking if within Simple AD, within the Samba directory, what kind of error reports or logs are available to debug where authentication is not working in a dev test environment?
So the standard Windows event logs, if you bring up the event viewer, you will see those authentication failures right? So you just point it to the domain controller. So
You'll see logs, but the developer wouldn't actually be able to get into the directory code itself.
You won't be able to get to access the directory server, but you can access the event logs to see event failure. Yeah.
Can you provision via CloudFormation? You don't need to use CloudFormation because that's actually what the service uses under the covers.
So that's another feature request that we've received as well. So it's on our roadmap. So again, happy to take, like Gene mentioned, right? We start with a minimum viable product to get things going, but iteratively you'll see many of these capabilities turned on, right? So not currently.
We have a large directory, but a small number of users in the VPC. Do we use the large directory or the small directory?
It's really more how many objects you want to manage with it. So if it's a simple AD, it really would depend on the object size, but typically a small number of users or a small number of objects, you'd use a small directory.
We can talk.
Connect, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you cover full system, there's multi-element forest. Do you connect up by the global catalog, or is it just for the
For the AD
Yes.
connector?
Yes.
Today, AD connector is talking specifically to a single domain, right? So we are, as part of our roadmap, again, we're enhancing the connector as well, so that if you want to turn on access, because you may not have necessary trust relationships to enable that access. So it really depends on the customer scenario.
Another one last question. If you have multiple simple ADs, can you establish AD trust?
Simple AD does not support trust relationships. As Gene had mentioned, it's running Samba 4, Active Directory compatible server. So it's really a limitation of the Samba 4 Active Directory compatible server today. And we're working with the community there. As that capabilities and those capabilities become available, we will project those capabilities through Simple AD for our customers.
That's using AD Connect, right? And if you have multiple single domain forests, just talking about that, and you have AD trust between the on-prem, right? And AD trust are transitive. In that scenario, does AD Connect just pack the AD trust?
Yes. Yes. We can take more questions outside.
Yeah, I think we need to wrap this so we can
kind of
let the next session come in and get set up, but we'll move across the hall and take all the questions you have.
So
Okay.
the session is SOV209. So